Well, Mr. President, it's about time for Democrats' weekly exercise in election year politics. Later today, we will take up another bill intended to provide a talking point for Democrat candidates, and the Democrat leader hopes put Republicans in a tight spot. But if he thinks to see Republicans quaking in their boots over being asked to take these votes, he should think again. Because, Mr. President, we welcome a chance to talk about the Democrat agenda. Take this afternoon's exercise. Under the guise of protecting access to contraception, something that is not under threat, the Democrat leader is bringing up legislation that would not only funnel money to Democrats' allies at Planned Parenthood, but would wipe out conscience protections for health care providers. The bill specifically targets the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which was bipartisan legislation passed in 1993, back, I might add, when Democrats actually believed in protecting our First Amendment freedoms. And this is not the first time Democrats have attempted to carve out sweeping exceptions to this once widely supported legislation. Apparently, Americans are free to live out their deeply held moral and religious beliefs when they don't conflict with Democrats' policy positions. Mr. President, it's deeply disturbing that the Democrat leader has gone from sponsoring the Religious Freedom Restoration Act to attempting to decide when and how Americans can exercise one of their fundamental First Amendment rights. And if the Democrat leader thinks that Republicans are intimidated to cast a vote against legislation that would seriously imperil Americans' ability to live according to their consciences, well, as I said, he should think again. Mr. President, I suspect there are few Americans who don't recognize the Democrat leader's politicking for exactly what it is. Just as I suspect there are few Americans who bought Democrats' border legislation ploy 2 weeks ago. The Democrat leader apparently thought that he could erase Americans' memory of 3+ years of chaos at the southern border under President Biden by bringing up a vote on a border bill that he knew would not be able to pass the Senate. But I think he'll find that Americans' memories are more retentive than that. 3 years of national security crisis were not wiped out by a show vote intended to provide electoral cover for Democrats. Just as they won't be wiped out by President Biden's latest election year ploy, an executive order to implement border restrictions, the likes of which he should have implemented years ago. If anything, any improvements at the border stemming from the President's latest measure will only serve to highlight the President's failure to address this crisis earlier and the needless danger to which he has subjected Americans. Mr. President, I mentioned that the Democrat leader knew his border show vote would fail, just as he knows his Planned Parenthood subsidy and religious freedom legislation will fail this afternoon. And that, of course, points to the fundamental unseriousness of what the Democrat leader is doing. If the Democrat leader had any real interest in legislating on these issues, he would be working with Republicans to bring up legislation that actually has a chance of receiving support from both Democrats and Republicans. Senator Joni Ernst, for example, has legislation to promote access to contraception. But that's not the legislation Senator Schumer is bringing up, because these votes have nothing to do with legislating and everything to do with boosting Democrats' electoral chances, he hopes, in this fall's elections. Mr. President, I suspect the exercises in election politics will continue. Look for this to be the summer of show votes here in the United States Senate. But as I said, Republicans are ready for it. We are happy to talk about the Democrat agenda, whether that's the President's disastrous border policies or lack thereof, or Democrats' never-ending inflation crisis, or another attempt by the Democrat leader to force through legislation to legalize abortion up until the moment of birth. All the show votes in the world won't erase Democrats' record, as Democrats may discover to their cost. Mr. President, I yield the floor.